everybody, it's Rebecca here at Weimermaids, and it's time for my December wrap-up. I read 8 books in December, so I have officially come out of that reading slump that I was kind of in from September on, really. I still blame booktubeathon and going back to school, but I finally got out of it, at least for December. We'll see what happens in January, but you know, Christmas break, I had 2 weeks off. I think that might have helped. Also, I did read some graphic novels and some manga, which also kind of upped my reading count, but I still did fairly well. I mean, 8 books is quite a bit for me, so I'm quite proud of it. So yay! And it's January now that I'm filming this, obviously, and I have already read 3.5, 4? It's like 3 full books and then 2 halves of other ones. So I think I'm still doing pretty well, and it's only like the 11th or something. It's pretty early in January, so I'm off to a really good start. So yay December for jumping me out of that. So let's get into the books that I read. I'm gonna start off with Why Not Me by Mindy Kaling. I've listened to this on audiobook, and this is Mindy's second memoir of sorts. The first one was Is Everyone Hanging Out Without Me? And so this was the second one called Why Not Me, and it's more of her story about being like, why not me? Why can't I do this? Who says I can't do this? And things like that. And so it's empowering. I like Mindy a lot anyway. I don't really watch her show anymore, but I do appreciate her for kind of like, you know, jumping in there and pushing the boundaries and, you know, being like a younger version of Tina and Amy, I guess you could kind of say, only not quite as funny. So she really does push the boundaries, and she's like, hey, I'm gonna do this. This is me, and I'm me, and so why not me? And so I really enjoyed it, and I ended up giving it 4 out of 5 stars. And again, I listened to the audiobook, which is great because she reads it, and I love listening to audiobooks that are read by the author, particularly if it's a memoir. I just think it adds another element to it, and so I really appreciated that. Next up, I read Illuminae by Amy Kaufman and Kristoff, and I got this from the library, but I ended up buying a copy, which I mentioned in the book haul, just because it's so good, it's so beautiful. I love the style of this book, how it's told with video surveillance and IM conversations and emails, and part of it is from an AI's perspective, which is really interesting. Yeah, it does have some of its like YA typical tropes and things like that, but I think that overall the style of the book and the characterization of Aiden, the AI, the story in general, I think make up for all of those little tropes and like the YA love story type thing. So I loved it. It's basically the story of, it's hard to explain, but there's a corporation war in space going on, and it ends up being a pursuit, and there are like crazy things happening on the spaceships, and I don't want to give any more away because it really will ruin it for you. So I do recommend checking this one out, especially if you're maybe new to sci-fi. This one might be a really good one to kind of do that. Now, it doesn't have traditional narration, so if you don't like reading IMs and emails and things like that, you may struggle with it, but I thought it was brilliant and I loved it, and I did give it 5 stars. Next up, I read The Young Elites by Marie Lu, and this is, I had some issues with this one. I really loved the Legend trilogy that Marie Lu wrote, and I like the characters of The Young Elites in a sense, and I love that it's more of a villain backstory. I mean, I love me some Darth Vader, but I just wasn't like the biggest fan of the rest of it. I just felt like it was predictable and kind of boring, and the world wasn't as built up as I think it should have been. I didn't really understand the magic sense in that world, and so I just didn't love it. Story's about, basically in this world, there was a plague that happened about like 18, 15 years ago, whatever, sometime like that. All the adults who caught it died, all the young kids, a lot of them who caught it were left marked in some way, and many of them gained abilities. Well, our main character obviously is going to get in one of those abilities a little bit later in life, and there's this whole group of these powerful people called the Young Elites, and there's like a whole rebellion, uprising, because of course the government is against these people. They're all like looking down at these marked people, and so there's like a whole power struggle, and our main girl is kind of caught in the middle of all of that, and it is the story of a villain and her coming into her own and figuring out what she stands for and all of that kind of stuff. And so I did like that part of it, and I did like the characters, but I just didn't really care. I couldn't really connect, and I did give it 2 out of 5 stars. Next up, I picked up the first volume of the graphic novel Saga, which I've heard many great things about, which is basically like the story of these alien races who came together. There's like a war going on, and 2 of them kind of came together and had a child, and it's them trying to escape, and people are hunting the child and whatnot. And I found it really interesting. I didn't love it as much as some people do, but I liked it. I thought the art was really pretty, and I ended up giving it 3 out of 5 stars. I also decided to read my very first ever manga, which was Death Note Volume 1, just because I've heard a lot of great things about it from like Raylene and Kaz from Little Book Owl, and they always talk about it, and so I was like, let me try this one. Let me just try it. It was at the library, so I picked it up, and I really liked it. It's basically the story of this kid who, there's like a death notebook, Death has a notebook that this like death demon dude has, and he drops it, and the human picks it up, the boy, and with this death notebook you can kill people by writing their name down. So it's kind of this struggle of like playing God and trying to do what's right for the world, but is that villainous in itself? And I love this conflict and this battle, this idea. Again, I really like villains, and I like examining villains and their motivations, and are they really a villain? Are they not a villain? If they're really trying to just help out the world, but they're killing people to do it. It questions all of these things, and I think it's really interesting, and I did already get the next 3 volumes from the library to read from Death Note, and I think I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Just kidding, I only read 7 books this month. The last one, I wrote it down, but I didn't finish it. I finished it in January, so my bad, it's only 7, but 7 is still a decent number, and I'm really proud of 7. Last 2 books I'm going to talk about today are, of course, my last 2 Year of Gaiman, because I did not read any Neil Gaiman books in November. I failed. So I had to read 2 in December because I wanted to finish out. I wanted to make sure I'd read them all by the end of the year. So I made an effort to make sure that happened. And so the 2 that I read were Anansi Boys and The Graveyard Book. So I listened to Anansi Boys. I did the audiobook for this one, which I really loved. I was kind of skeptical about going in. It's the sequel to American Gods in a sense, like it's in the same world and it features one of the same characters, but not entirely. I don't want to give away spoilers, but it is a continuation of that world of American Gods, about how gods are real, basically. So I was kind of worried that it was going to take me the entire month to read, so I decided to, after I finished Why Not Me, I was like, hey, I have couple weeks left. I can probably knock this out on audiobook, and then I can read some other books at the same time. So I did that. It really helped me get into the world again, and the narrator was just wonderful. He did all the accents. I had no idea that like Anansi was this whole like origin comes from the islands, and so the narrator did the island voice, and I thought it was really brilliant and fantastic. And I actually ended up really liking the story. I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. And the last one that I did read was, of course, The Graveyard Book, which I mentioned, and again, I wasn't sure what I was gonna think about this one. I always feel about this with Neil Gaiman books. I'm like, meh. And then I read it and end up loving it. This is The Jungle Book retold in a graveyard. And I've never actually read The Jungle Book, but it makes me want to read it more. I've seen the Disney movie. So basically, there's a little boy whose name is Nobody, and he kind of is being hunted. In the very beginning, this murderer comes and kills his family, and he escapes to a graveyard. And the graveyard takes him in as one of their own, and he grows up in the graveyard. And so it's all of these different stories of growing up in the graveyard. He's kind of balancing this world and living between the world between the living and the dead. And I think it's really great and really fun, and I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. Well, those are all the books that I read in the month of December. Let me know what you read in December or what you thought about any of these. And that is it for me today. I'll see you next time.